Dead by Daylight is toxic is a phrase that many utter, and it seems very widespread throughout the DBD community, but also wider into other gaming communities too. But why is DBD actually perceived this way? Well, the main arguments I hear for DBD's toxicity are typically ones relating to how the player base dictates the rules of the game, the unwritten rules as it were. This, and also how both sides of survivor and killer act within the trials, performing toxic actions onto one another. The typical things of teabagging, flashlight clicking, hitting on hook, tunneling, and camping, all the buzzwords. Then there's the people viewed as toxic for the way they play, running certain powerful builds or perk combos. But is any of this actually toxic? The core of DBD's perceived toxicity problem, I think, is misinterpretation. This happens in most matches, I think, and it's not necessarily even your fault if you fall for this. I certainly have. Let me give you an idea of what I mean. Let's talk about a very common phrase for the killer side in DBD, which is just leave. A phrase that gets paired up with clips of killers frustratingly catching survivors at the last moment at the exit gates. Take this game for example, where I've just been absolutely battered, but the survivors are refusing to leave, and this leads me to think, oh, they're being toxic because they're waiting for me to push them out. But you have to question if there's any other reason they might be staying. Maybe they're waiting on the last teammate and want to make sure they're safe. Maybe they're messing around at the exit and having a bit of fun. Maybe they're giving you a hit for extra BP before the trial ends, which does annoy me to be fair, I don't care about 50 BP or whatever. Then finally, yeah, they might just be waiting so they can mock you at the exit, because they want to flex on you that they won. The problem here though is that most will typically jump to that last conclusion right away. The thought process doesn't cover all of those other options, it's just straight to, they want me to be miserable. Take the situation from the other side, as a survivor player. There's plenty of games where I've remained in the trial beyond the exits being opened. There are times when I'm waiting on a teammate, or I'm searching for them somewhere in the trial grounds. Other times I've been trying to finish off a challenge and break a totem or something. More specifically, around the exits, I've waited there for the same reasons. For a teammate, or a challenge of some kind. The number of times I've purposely waited for the killer because I want to flex that I won is maybe like less than 1% of those times, which I think is also important to remember, that most times when stuff like this happens, it's usually one game within many, but you remember it because it annoyed you. Let's talk about the unwritten rules, as this seems to be a big point made against the game and how toxic or controlling the community is when it comes to the rules you have to follow. For killers, it's usually stuff like don't camp, don't tunnel, don't slug, chase a different person after each hook, have mercy on the last survivor, that type of thing. For survivors, it's don't teabag, flashlight click, or repeatedly blind, don't rush the generators, don't wait longer in the game than you have to, and so on. The unwritten rules even frequently expand out into some of the most obscure areas of the game, asking people to do things like match their outfits with other players in their lobby, or to give a survivor the hatch if you hear it whilst carrying them to a hook. A lot of these aren't particularly logical, and make you perform very differently if you follow them all. The only time you probably don't follow any rules at all in fact is when you're new to the game, because you've not been exposed to them yet. The truth here though is simply that you don't have to follow them. This also isn't exclusively a DBD thing as some people seem to think. These types of rules exist throughout gaming communities for varying games and have done for years. This is not some new phenomenon for DBD. Following these made up rules that quite literally don't exist is more of a player honor system, but this still doesn't mean you have to follow them, nor does it mean they're consistent. The game itself even goes out of its way to tell you there's nothing wrong with these actions, with the report screen in the endgame even specifying that camping, tunneling, slugging, or teabagging are not reportable offenses. We have of course had more strict limitations put onto players with anti-camp or anti-tunnel mechanics, but these are more measures to punish them as unfun, not to stop you entirely. They were given restriction, not complete removal. The closest we've gotten to the developers acknowledging something like this is toxic, in-game, is with Judgment's mechanic where you gain heresy for teabagging near the killer or waiting at the exit, but that's something we'll discuss more later. I myself have made multiple videos about these unwritten rules, from what I think is more of a fun perspective. I wasn't trying to actually establish any rules with these videos, but merely comment on the fact that they exist. One thing I noticed when making these too is that there were a wide variety of people who thought of these rules very differently. pretty much no one agrees on any set rule, even if they may seem like straightforward ones like don't tunnel. This is why they're unwritten, because they aren't really rules, nor are they shared between the majority of players. A large portion of the community may believe in a core set of unwritten rules, but again, these rules don't exist, and so people not following them does not make them toxic, even by the game's own admission. These things are fine. I do a thing on stream every week called Mori Monday, where my goal for the stream is to try and get as many Moris as possible by any means possible. This means I run a Mori every game, I put on stronger perks, and I typically do tunnel or camp when required to secure kills. I can personally count on one hand how many people in the endgame chat have been mad, or to have even come into my stream to complain about how I played, with one occasion where I was spoken to quite rudely. But even this isn't really a DBD problem. If someone is harassing you or more extremely doing something like calling you a slur for the way you played the game, that's a problem with the person, not the game. It's not a DBD problem, it's a human problem, evident again by the fact that this happens far and wide across the internet and gaming spaces as a whole. The problem is with those people and how they choose to act. And luckily in DBD there are actually ways to address and counter this. For one, there's the report feature, which does work, but there's also the ability to go anonymous or even just close the chat entirely, which leaves you only with in-game actions to communicate, which is what I want to discuss next. In-game actions are things that encompass everything that actually happens in the trial that is often perceived as toxic, such as teabags, points, flashlight clicking, hitting on hook, tunneling, camping, and slugging, and all of that type of stuff. This is maybe the category here that is the most misinterpreted, as I tried to outline a bit already with the intro. I think this is largely down to the fact that actions in-game are often attributed meaning by the other side. Whether you're a survivor commenting on a killer tunneling you, or say as a killer commenting on a survivor refusing to leave. Ultimately in both cases you're assuming what the player is thinking, and in many ways projecting your thoughts and feelings onto them. Let's look at this clip in the background for example, and I want you to watch it and tell me, do you think in this case is the survivor teabagging at me being toxic? Or are there other possibilities, like say trying to get my attention, drawing me away, or even something like a misclick or just having a bit of fun? I thought I'd ask you all as I was interested in how you'd respond, and the results were very varied. It was only actually about a third of respondents that really believed this was truly toxic, with most further believing they were trying to distract me, or were just having a bit of fun, and maybe being a little bit toxic too, a mix of different things. But the point is, there wasn't a clear conclusion. I do think it's easier too when you're reviewing a clip like this and not playing the game yourself. In the moment it may feel super toxic that they're clicking their flashlight and teabagging you, but with retrospect and actually watching it back you can notice, oh no, they were just trying to draw me away probably. It's actions like this that I think are often misinterpreted, and many times meaning is projected onto people despite not really knowing what their intention is. From my experience with this player earlier in the match, they were playing in a slightly annoying way, waiting at every pallet to drop them, doing some runs in circles, but this was the only time they teabagged me. I personally didn't see anything wrong with it, and my personal assumption was that they were likely just trying to get my attention, to draw me away from the teammate I'd just downed. Someone could point at you or teabag you as the killer, but this doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it maliciously. It also doesn't mean they aren't. But most seem to go for that assumption right away that they're just being toxic. Yet on the flip side as Survivor, the only time I personally point or teabag is usually in relation to something else, like trying to get the killer's attention away from a teammate or even notifying a teammate about their approach. I personally do these things very rarely to aggravate the other side. The other core one is just doing it for fun. The amount of teams I face where I've been teabagged but in the endgame the survivors are super chill is high, and most of these time, these people are just a group of friends having a laugh with no intent of hurting you as the player on the other side. I've had people absolutely destroy me live on stream and then they come to my chat and they're super friendly. Not everything is so black and white. My point is that most situations in DBD can realistically be solved by just understanding that you don't know what the other side is feeling or thinking about you, unless you're literally like watching a stream or something, I guess. In my Mori Monday matches, for example, when I'm tunneling someone, you'll see that I'm just chilling there, messing around. There's no hate behind my actions, I'm just playing the game. And this is sort of the case more widely for DBD, I think. Yes, there are bad actors out there who choose to try and slug and make your game miserable on purpose, but the majority of people who teabag or tunnel or slug or whatever are likely just playing the game or messing around with their friends. They're not trying to make you feel horrible or angry. I think a large reason why this happens happens so frequently in DBD though is due to the asymmetry of the game. It quite literally establishes two sides to be pit against one another, and so in many ways it's only natural to have an innate feeling of negativity toward or desire to beat the other side. That's your opponent. And it's with this lens that it becomes easy to instantly view the opposing side as being toxic. If they do certain actions you associate with being toxic. However, there's no hard set rules, and there's no way to know what the other person you're facing is thinking unless you're directly told or shown. This again is no different to any other game that has two sides or teams. DBD is no more toxic, and is less arguably than games like CS or Overwatch or Rainbow Six Siege that include mid-game chat. It's interesting too in the current day when it comes to things like toxicity or BMing, as back in the early days of Halo for example, something like a teabag was sure meant to be an FU to your opponent, but it was largely taken in good fun. It's only recently I feel where it's been made into this horrific thing that is horribly disrespectful, when the person on the other side could just be having a laugh. And this is from someone who doesn't really teabag or do these things, but I can see why people would. With the recent addition of the Judgment to the game, some in-game actions have been somewhat officially been given the toxic label for the first time in a way. If you teabag the killer close by to them, you gain heresy, a punishment mechanic. You can even get caught out at the exit gates if you waited them. I don't think this is necessarily condemning these acts entirely still though, as ultimately this was a community killer built to represent us. A big part of the community is these unwritten rules and interactions, and therefore I think this is more of just a fun reference toward these ideas, and less so a definitive stance on teabagging being bad. Because if that were true, I'm sure they would just remove it, much like how they removed flashlight clicking, a mechanic where you could repeatedly spam your flashlight and make an annoying clicking noise. A case where it was removed partly due to its repeat flashing lights, but also due to the toxicity that came with it, which wasn't intended. Nowadays if you try to flashlight click, you can't because the beamer has a slight pause between each press. If teabagging was really viewed in the same way, I'm sure they'd add some kind of crouch delay, or animation to stop you from doing it. The final one, and maybe the most ridiculous, is perks and builds, and the controversy even that often comes with these. Whether it be that you're running a powerful exhaustion perk as a survivor, or full slowdown as killer, or playing a killer that's powerful like the nurse, people using full meta or slowdown are also often viewed as being toxic purely by their choice of what they run. They take a look at their build and just assume they have to be toxic. If they're using nurse, they must be toxic because they're abusing the strongest character for an easy win. I had a game recently where I just chilled as nurse with it being my first game on, trying to get into the swing of things, and I had a group of survivors doing the whole easy thing in endgame for a match I was personally just relaxing for. But often it's simply a case in many people's minds that nurse equals strong equals therefore they're trying to dominate me or be toxic, which couldn't be further from the truth, using this logic to then justify their own toxicity. I say this kind of argument is the silliest because I find that this is usually the area with the most hypocrisy, where often the people complaining about the strong build or character, or being toxic towards you for playing them, are also the ones running the strong build or character on their own side. With that nurse game I mentioned, all of the survivors had strong builds, bar maybe the singular scene partner dropped in there, with 2 BNPs, but just because I was playing nurse I got the whole go cry and easy spiel. I likely wouldn't have even assumed this group was toxic just based on what they were running, had they not crashed out at me like this in the endgame chat. And it comes back to the thing I've mentioned a few times in this video, which is that you don't know why someone is doing what they are. In this case, why they run what they run, or why they play the character they do. Maybe the Meg running Sprint Burst, Adrenaline, and a BNP toolbox just had a really bad day and they want to hop on DBD and have an easier time. Or maybe they just like those perks and find them fun and they're not trying to abuse anything, quote unquote. That person who mains nurse, maybe they just like the uniqueness of the character and their movement. Maybe they run pain res because they find killer stressful and appreciate the game delay. Not every build or action in game is a toxic one. These common associations that strong killer equals toxic tryhard, or meta perk equals someone trying to personally ruin the game for you, are just so unhealthy as mindsets, and are easy to fall into. I think largely because it's an easy way to explain away what is essentially just frustration with having to deal with facing those perks or killers. Frustration is fine, and healthy of course, but applying labels of toxicity isn't. The other perk or build related thing that I think many miss is the fact or belief that you're meant to win every game, or even stand a fighting chance, no matter the situation. The truth is though really that some games are just a bit stacked against you. You might load in as Clown, say, against a full meta perk Swift on Spring Ringwood. If you don't win that game, there's no shame. Even if you get one hook there, you did a pretty good job. And again, this circumstance can be easily misinterpreted as a toxic Swift destroying you on a weak character, when from their perspective it was just a group of friends having fun and wanting to all survive. Is it really so bad? I want to conclude this point by saying that this is by no means meant to be a holier-than-thou take on toxicity in DBD, especially as I know I've fallen into many of these categories or pitfalls before myself. I've made assumptions or believed a player was acting in a certain way to annoy me, but then reflected and decided that it's not the case. It's important, I think, to try and reflect on what happens in-game and consider that maybe it isn't as personal as you think it is. Maybe sometimes people are just existing and playing. Even if they are confirmed to be trying to annoy you, so what? I think the best policy is to shrug it off, let them sink down to that level. If someone genuinely has the intent to upset you, beyond just beating you in the game, then again, that's a problem with them as a person, because it's not normal behavior. Let me know, as always, your thoughts below, and if you agree or disagree with anything I've said, I'll be interested to hear all of your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.